brilliantly, and somebody else has come in, and now the screen, as you'll know, I'm in the media room in Marrakesh. How about that? I've flown the magic carpet. I came in on Wednesday. I'm going back on Monday. This visit to the trip has been really successful. And to Keith from Wolverhampton, we need to get together and have a beer, Keith. And I'll tell you what's happened. One of the highlights of this trip has been I ended up playing chess in the school with a 9-year-old little girl and got stuffed. Now, isn't that a story all in itself? So Bain's gone, so I'm going to go ask Donald. So we're here with the World Storytelling Cafe and conjunction with Get a Word in Edgeways Festival from Shropshire in England. I'm going to go straight to Donald. Donald, will you please start the story round by doing the first story?
Okay, right. I wasn't actually prepared for this, but I thought Baden was going, not Baden, oh, spit that name out my mouth. I thought Barbara C was going first, but anyway, there was this fella, this chap who worked for a farmer, and it was in Lanarkshire in the west of Scotland, and the farmer said to him, "Go up to Merlin's Crag and dig some peats for me, because we need some peats for the winter." And Merlin's Crag was named after the famous wizard Merlin, because it said that one night he spent a night. Now, I suppose it's a bit like Mary Queen of Scots. Uh, Everywhere in Scotland, if Mary Queen of Scots spent a night in every single castle that they say she spent a night in, she must have been staying a night in a different one every night for about 250 years. But anyway, they say this Merlin's Crag was legendary because they said there were fairies round about. And this chap, this man, this labourer, what they called an oraman, he was a sort of handyman on the farm. He didn't have a specific uh, job. He just like did what he was told, more or less. And he was told to go up and dig some peats round about Merlin's Crag. Now, he went up there and he dug some peats and he put them on his little barrow and he was ready to push it down the hill, and he heard a noise behind him. And he looked round, and there was this little woman, about maybe 2 foot tall, and she was wearing a green smock and red tights, and she had beautiful golden hair right down past her shoulders. And she said to him, "How would you like it?" And he said, "What?" And she raised her finger. "How would you like it if I sent my husband round to rip off the roof of your house?" And the man said, "Sorry, what are you talking about?" She said, "You have been digging these peats here, and you've just ripped the roof off my house." And the man said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't realise." And she said, "Well, if you don't put that back, you are going to suffer the consequences." Well, the man had heard of the fairy lore, and he had heard what fairies mischief can do to your life. And I thought, I'm just going to go and put these peats back. So he put every single piece of puff back exactly as he got it. And the wee woman said, "That's fine, but just be careful." And The man ran all the way, he held on to his spade, and he ran all the way back down to the farm, and he told his master, I was digging the peats and I had lots dug up, and this little fairy woman came and she said that I had to put them back, and his boss said, "Don't give me that nonsense. Like fairies and you didn't do any work at all. You didn't pick the peats up. You've been sitting up there drinking your flask of tea, and you've not done any work at all." And the man said, "Honestly, I dug up lots of peats and I had to put them back." And the farmer, his boss, the farmer said, "A lot of rubbish. Look, see tomorrow. Take the horse and cart. Take the horse and cart and take it back up there, and I want you to fill that cart with peat and bring it back here, and then we can lay it out and we can dry it for the winter." Well, the man was afraid of his job, so he did what he was told. And while he was up digging the peats, he was watching his back all the time, but he never saw anyone. And he filled the cart and he took it back down. And they unloaded the peat and they spread it out in the barn to dry. Well, over the next few months, weeks and weeks and months, nothing happened. And the, the labourer, the man, he thought, you know, maybe that's a lot of nonsense. Maybe not, my boss is right. Maybe that, you know, that like it was all a dream. Maybe it was all a dream. And when it came summer, and then autumn, and then winter, and it was time to cut the peats again, he went back, and he filled the cart. And he filled the cart and he took it back home. And the farmer was so pleased with all the peats that he gave the man a little can of milk. He said, "Take that home to your wife." So the man walked away home. And as he was heading home, he had to turn by Merlin's Crag. And he turned by Merlin's Crag. He suddenly felt very, very tired. His eyes were drooping. His feet felt very heavy. And he thought, "Oh, God, I need to sit down. I need to sit down for a minute." So he did. He sat down for a minute. The next thing, it was midnight. And he woke up. And the moon was shining down. And he stood up and he thought, "Oh, I don't know, but this is in the days before they had watches and like, oh, the moon's up. I better get home." But as he tried to get home, he noticed he was surrounded by fairies, lots and lots of fairies dancing around and singing and shaking their fists, and you took our peat, you took our peat. Well, he couldn't escape, and one of the fairies said, if you dance, we'll set you free." So he started to dance, but he couldn't dance. He was rubbish. He's a bit like me. He just couldn't dance. And he, but he started to dance anyway. And this fairy took his hands, and suddenly he could dance. He was twirling. He was waltzing. He could do all the moves that anybody in Strictly would be jealous of. He was dancing round and round and round, and he had a great time, and he forgot about his wife, and he forgot about his children, he forgot about going home, and he he just had a fantastic time. But then they heard a noise. Cock-a-doodle-doo! It was a cockerel from the farm bringing in the dawn. Well, all the fairies, they ran back. They started to run, and they grabbed the man, and they took him back. And suddenly, on the crag, on Merlin's Crag, a door opened, and they ran in, and they sat down. The fairies sitting on little couches. The man sat on a rock and watched what the fairies were doing. And the fairies went about their tasks, and they said to the man, "You must never, ever, ever tell anyone what you saw here today." And the man said, "Don't worry, I won't." And they sat there until the evening, and he was trapped. And he said, how am I going to get home? I don't know how I'm going to get home. And the little woman in a green dress and red tights and long flowing hair, golden hair, came to him and said, "You know something? All the peat has grown back on the roof of our house. You're free to go." And the door opened, and he left. And he walked back home, and the little can of milk that he'd been given was still sitting outside. And he walked back home. But when he opened the door of his home, his wife looked at him. "Where have you been?" And his children, who'd been toddlers all that time, were now grown to not quite young adults, but 10, 11 years old. And they were frightened of him. "Who's this stranger?" And his wife said, "Where have you been all these 7 long years?" And the man thought, that's what's happened. That's one night that man has spent with the fairies. It turned into 7 long years. Thank you.
Ah, Donald, wonderful as ever.
Okay.
Wonderful as ever.
Wonderful, well done. Okay, that's lovely. Thank you very much. That's a lovely story, Donald, and it's I'm not sure I've heard it before. I've heard something similar. I think you may have told it to me a few years ago, maybe. But
Yeah,
I love that story.
there's a lot of similar stories. I mean, I told one last time about the fairy hill opening.
Yeah,
And there's so many stories about mortals being trapped in fairy hills.
yeah, yeah. No, Mike Connor tells one down in from Cornwall and things like that. So the batting order is now going to be Keith from Lincolnshire, Keith from Wolverhampton, and then Eleanor, hopefully from Nova Scotia. I'm putting you in number 5, if that's all right. Can you put your thumb up? Can I see you?
So have I been reordered?
Yeah, I'll put you in at some point, Baba. Okay.
Okay.
Right, so we're going to go to Keith from Lincolnshire, then Keith from Wolverhampton, and then Eleanor. Okay, that's where we're going so far. Okay.
Right.
So, Keith. Sit.
Yeah, well, hello, everybody. It's just a short poem by Alfred Lord Tennyson tonight. It's called Crossing the Bar. Sunset and evening star, and one clear call for me. I may there be no morning of the bar when I put out to sea. But such a tide as moving seems asleep, too full for sound and foam, when that which drew from out of the boundless deep turns again home. Twilight's an evening bell, and after that the dark. And may there be no sadness of farewell when I embark. For though from out of our bourne of time and place the flood may bear me far, I hope to see my pilot face to face when I have crossed the bar.
Okay, Mike has vanished. Is that it?
Yeah.
Is that it, Keith? Okay. Oh, if you can hear me, Mike, you haven't mentioned Rashid in your list of tellers, but is he there? I don't. Okay, Mike. Okay. Okay, folks, I would like to tell you the story of the Hare of Easington. Now, the men of Castle Eden were sportsmen, and these sports were usually at the expense of the local wildlife. And on high days and holidays, they like to gather at a huge field. Imagine a field, massive field rising into the distance, a field of grass. To the left is a dean, a valley covered in woodland. And they would gather there hare coursing. They would bring their greyhounds, and the carpenter would bet with the butcher, and the thatcher would bet with the shepherd, and they would have fine sport, sending their dogs after a hare that was flushed from the bushes to the right-hand side of the field. Until one day, as they set themselves ready to whoop, and a hare broke cover and began to run up the field. Before they could let slip their greyhounds, another hare, a strange-looking hare, appeared from the undergrowth and ran across the field, not up it, not away from the dogs. And this was an unusual hare, for it wasn't sandy-coloured or grey. It was the colour of a mole. And they watched as this hare ran across the field, almost to say to the dogs, chase me, for I am slower than my brothers who roar up that hill. And the dogs set off after the black hare. And they set off down into the Dean, in amongst the woods, and there was much yapping and howling as the dogs lost sight of the hare amongst all the trees and the woodland, and the men chased after them, and some dogs came back in the hue and cry, and some were never seen again. And the men were put out, for their sport had been ruined. And next time they gathered, there again the bets were laid, the local tradesmen against each other, and they were about to let slip their dogs as a hare was flush with the bushes on the right, when the black hare appeared again and ran across the field, slower than his brothers, and the dogs veered off towards it. And they chased it, and again there was a hue and cry, and they didn't catch the hare, and not all the dogs came back. And this happened on 4 occasions, and the men were becoming frustrated, for their sport was being ruined. They tried trapping the hare. That didn't work. They tried shooting the hare, which was even less successful. So in the end, one of their numbers said, what about the horse doctor? For he is an ancient man in the village. He is an ancient man who knows the ways of animals. He's the one who may help us. And the delegation went to see him. and he was sitting outside his hut, all the paraphernalia of a horse doctor outside. And they told him their woe. They told him about the hare that was disrupting their fun. He scratched his chin and said, yes, no point in sending your greyhounds after that hare, he said. You need to send a bloodhound that will follow it remorselessly until it captures it. It will follow it until it is tired out. The men found a bloodhound and brought it to their next occasion. And sure enough, a hare was flashed from the bushes to the right. The greyhounds were held, but this time, when the black hare ran across the field, they released the bloodhound. And the bloodhound, sniffing the ground, ears flapping, ran after the hare into the Dean. And the men stood and watched and thought, oh, this is it. He's vanished into the Dean. We'll never see it again. We probably won't even see the bloodhound. But then as they watched the far side of the bank of the valley, there was the hare running up the bank. And behind it, way behind it, was the bloodhound. They leapt upon their horses and they raced after the two. And they watched as the hare became tired, going through thorned hedges, over styes, and they followed, leaping over pie bar gates on their horses until they came to the edge of the village of Essington. And there the hare ran through a hole in the fence, a hole in the fence of a tiny cottage. But as it got to the hole, the bloodhound caught up with it and grabbed its ankle. But the hare shook itself free and went through the hole, and the bloodhound was stuck, for the hole was too small for it to go through. And it ran back and forth, trying to find a way in as the men arrived on their horses and dismounted. And stopping, they went through the gate of the cottage, up to the door. Those doors were locked in those days. And they marched in. And there they found not a hare, but a frail-looking old woman sitting in a chair by the hob. And the woman was bandaging her ankle. And they could see the blood showing through the bandage. And they were aghast, for they did not know what to say, for they understood what had happened and what they had seen that day. But before they could speak, the old woman stood, not looking so frail now, standing upright, back straight, and she gave them that look that you might say could stop a charging bull. Now, she said, my youngsters will be safe on your field. And so it was that all the hares of Essington and Castledene were safe from that day onwards. But I'm afraid the same could not be said for the foxes and the pheasants. Thank you.
Oh, Keith, that's lovely. And I've been to Essington and I know that part of the world, and that is just lovely. And thank you very much. So the batting order now, we're going to Eleanor, then Babasi, then Rasheen and Baden. I'll put you down last but very much not least. And if you're going to do one, can you put your thumb up? Right, that's great. So the batting order now is Eleanor from Nova Scotia, Baba, you're on after that, Rasheen and Baden. Okay, so
How's my sound?
yeah,
It's okay?
yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
good. Well, lately I've been going back to an old passion and reinvestigating Norse mythology, which I had done a lot of when I lived in Newfoundland, because Right up at the northern tip was the World Heritage Site of where the Vikings had lived for a year. So this is one that I hadn't told. Kids really liked this in school because there was a unit on Viking mythology or Norse mythology, not necessarily. Anyway, this one is the story of Otter's ransom. And it was one of those days that Odin and Loki, the trickster god, and Honor, the god about we do not know too much, went for a walk down into Midgard, Middle Earth. They were walking up a river valley and came to a waterfall. There in the waterfall, on the bank, was an otter. And the otter was lying on its back. He had just caught a large salmon from the falls, and it was about to begin eating this salmon. And when Loki saw that, he picked up a rock and threw it, caught the otter in the head, and it fell over dead. Look at that, said Loki. I get 2 for 1 with that, the otter and the salmon. Well, now the 3 gods decided it was time to seek shelter for the night. So they walked along until they came to a fairly prosperous-looking farmhouse and knocked on the door. It was the house of a farmer named Hreidmar, who was more than just a farmer, I have to tell you. There was a bit of magician about him. So when he opened the door, they explained that the 3 of them were looking for shelter for the night. And by the way, they'd brought along enough food to feed themselves so that Hreidmar didn't have to worry about that. And they held out the salmon, and Hreidmar smiled. Then Hreidmar saw the otter hanging over Odin's shoulder, and his face went dark. He turned on his heel, went into the back room where his sons Fafnir and Fafnir and Regan were back there. And he said, "My sons, your brother Otter has been killed, and the men who killed him are in our front room." And Regan said, "Well, we'd better kill them then." "Well," said Hreidmar, their father, they look quite strong. There's one with an amazing-looking spear, and a little red-headed fellow with funny-looking slippers that I suspect are magic. But, I can cast a spell on them to weaken them, and we can take them on. So here's our plan, and let's go. Out they went to the front room. And Regan tackled Odin and got the spear, and Fafnir tackled Loki and got the magic shoes. And Hreidmar put a spell on them so they couldn't move. And the 3 family members of Hreidmar tied up the gods and bound them. "You have killed our son and brother," they announced, "and we are going to punish you." "Your son? Your brother?" said Odin. "We killed an otter by the riverbank." "That was my son," said Hreidmar. "He was our brother," said Fafnir and Regan. "Every day he changed himself into an otter and went up to that waterfall to catch salmon to bring back and feed us. And you killed him." Odin said, "I'm terribly sorry, but we didn't know that. He just looked like an ordinary otter. Oh, it was not our intention to kill him at all. Couldn't we pay some kind of virgeld or ransom?" And the Hreidmar thought about that for a bit. "We can discuss this," he said. So after a bit of thought, Hreidmar said, "Yes, we will take red gold in payment for Otter's death. We would like you to swear an oath that you will honor to bring us gold." So Odin quickly spared an oath. It looked like it was the best thing to do. And then Hreidmar said, "Now, here is the ransom I demand, to which you have sworn. I want enough red gold to fill the pelt of Otter, and to pile up over the pelt when it is filled, so that not one whisker or hair shows." Well, Odin knew where to send for gold, and Loki was the one to go. So he sent him off to where the dwarves lived under the mountains. And he told him to find the dwarf Andvari, who often wandered around as a fish, a pike swimming in the water there. "Go there and bring back enough red gold to fulfill the ransom," said Odin. So off went Loki, and sure enough, there was the pike in the water in the underground cave, and Loki had brought along a fish net and snared that fish. "Change your shape," said Loki, and Andvari changed back into his dwarfish self. "Oh, it's you, Loki. What do you want?" "I need all your red gold, every little bit of it." "Well, I'm not going to give it to you," said Andvari. "Well, I suggest you do, or things will not go well with you." And in the end, we had Andvari going into every cupboard and drawer and dragging out all the gold he could find heaped up anywhere and putting it into the 2 sacks that Loki held open for him. And when they were completely full, Loki noticed Andvari was wearing a very amazing looking gold ring on one finger. "I'll have that ring too," said Loki. "No," said Andvari, "you do not want this ring. Whoever has this ring will be followed by a terrible curse and lead to their destruction." But Loki said, "Give me the ring anyway." And so Andvari had to give up the ring. When he got back to Hreidmar's house, he had the 2 sacks of gold. Heimdall untied Hunnar and Odin and said, "Begin to pile up the gold into the pelt." And they piled gold and they piled gold. Odin noticed that ring that Loki was wearing, and he wanted it. So he pressured Loki to give it to him. They kept covering the otter. They filled the pelt, and then they began to cover its body. And when the 2 sacks of gold were emptied, Hreidmar looked carefully. "I see. 1 whisker. You have not fulfilled the oath you took." And Hreidmar noticed that ring on Odin's finger. Give that ring." Odin said, "I am not sure you want this ring. Give it here. Cover the whisker." And the whisker was covered. And that was how they fulfilled Otter's ransom. And when Odin and Loki and Hunnar left, they left behind the Hreidmar family with the ring and the curse. And you know that ring. That ring went forth into the world and caused great damage. It was the ring, the main ring of power. And we keep running into that everywhere, don't we? In operas, in books, and in the world. Thank you.
Oh, what a lovely story, Eleanor. Thank you ever so much. The Ring of Power. Oh, very brilliant. And I've just been reading about Harold Gudmundsson in 1066 and his children who went back over to Scandinavia after the conquest and things. So it all fitted in for me wonderfully well. So thank you very much. Right, so we're going to Babasi, then Machine, and then Baden. So Baba, are you there, my friend?
I'm here. So the poem I'm going to do has many different variations. and one of the titles is Two Dead Boys. And the version I'm reading is, what do you call it when it's in public domain? But it was written by Anonymous. Yeah, get that, Anonymous. Okay, here we go. And then I have a real quick one after that, but it's real quick. Ladies and gentlemen, skinny and stout, I'll tell you a tale I know nothing about. The admission is free, so pay at the door. Now pull up a chair and sit on the floor. One fine day in the middle of the night, two dead boys got up to fight. Back to back they faced each other, drew their swords and shot each other. A blind man came to watch fair play. A mute man came to shout, "Hooray!" A deaf policeman heard the noise and came to stop those two dead boys. He lived on the corner in the middle of the block, in a two-story house on a vacant lot. A man with no legs came walking by and kicked the lawman in his thigh. He crashed through a wall without making a sound into a dry creek, dead and suddenly drowned. The long black hearse came to cart him away, but he ran for his life and is still gone today. I watched from the corner of the big round table, the only eyewitness to facts of my fable. But if you doubt my lies are true, just ask the blind man, he saw it too. And then the real brief one, and the real brief one is because of the, well, it's not political, but it reminds me of the political climate here in the States. There was an important job to be done, and everybody was sure that somebody would do it. Anybody could have done it, but nobody did. Somebody got angry about that because it was everybody's job. Everybody thought that anybody could do it, but nobody realized that everybody wouldn't do it. It ended up that everybody blamed somebody when nobody did what anybody could have done. And this version is by Charles R. Swindoll. And I'm done.
Oh, Baba, that was just lovely. And that was another, that last has real resonance with me. It really does. There's a job to be done, but nobody wants to do it. Absolutely. So we go to Rasheen. Rasheen, now, where are you? Are you in Norfolk? Are you in Portugal? Are you in Spain?
No, we are just sat on the very edge of the Mediterranean, right on the corner of Andalusia, just before you get to Murcia region. Yesterday morning, we had the binoculars out and we were watching dolphins diving across the sea in front of the apartment that we're staying in. How cool is that?
That's very cool. That is very, very cool.
I mean, I could fill up a whole thing telling you how the hell we got here, because we were supposed to take a trip across the Bay of Biscay, but with all the storms, we ended up diverting to Dover, driving through France, driving through Spain, heavy rain, hail, snow. We finally got here 3 days late, but the sun's come out, so it's all right.
Well, yes, we're not that far from where I am.
Was this a holiday for your health?
Yeah, believe it or not, Keith, I thought I needed to unwind.
Well, tell Wallace that the stresses involved is so bad he needs to have a glass of whiskey. Okay? So we go to our friend Machine, and from Machine we go to Baton. Okay?
Right. So it's interesting that Donald told the story he has, because I've been working on a story that was inspired by a song. Wallace has brought one of his concertinas with him, and he's been playing a tune called The Banshee's Lament. And that inspired me to think about a story about my 4 times great-grandmother. Now, my 4 times great-grandmother, she lived in Munster near Cork, and her name was Honora Cronin. And Honora, she was the kind of girl who knew her own mind. Now, she lived in a little house, a tiny little one-up, one-down house with her mama and her daddy and her 4 young sisters. They lived on what the locals called a farm, but none of us would have thought of it as a farm. It was maybe 2 fields. And you know what? When Honora got to about 16, well, no one insisted she should get married and leave, but the hints were there. Oh, Honora, did you see Paddy O'Brien down at the market? He's only 42. He'd make a lovely husband for you, my darling. Oh, Honora, Oh, did you see that Mary O'Flanagan? She's getting married next week and she's 4 weeks younger than you. Oh, do you not think it's about time? She was 16 and Nora wasn't interested. But she was getting fed up with all the little niggles and hints and suggestions she might like to leave home and leave a bit more space for the rest of the family. And it got so bad. Now, tonight, as many of you know, is the day of Imbolc, which is a very sacred time. The next magical time in the calendar is Beltane, the eve of May. And it was on a Beltane evening when Honora had had enough of all this. She grabbed her shawl, she put it around her shoulders, and she went for a walk. She'd had enough of her parents and all their little nudges and niggles and her sisters giggling behind their hands. And she went for a walk up the hill. And she stormed out the house and she stomped. But you know what? As she walked up the hill and she breathed the fresh air, smelling of the heather, and she heard the curlew crying in the distance, her heart started to slow, her pace started to slow, and she walked up the hills, up to where the fairy hill was. And she started listening to the breeze and the sound of the sea in the far distance. And a noise came to her that she hadn't heard before. It was like fiddle music, and it was a tune she'd never heard. And she was really fascinated by this. And she thought, am I just imagining it? But she carried on walking, and it wasn't long before the music was getting louder. And she turned the back of the hillock, and there was a cleft in the hill she'd never seen before. And it was almost like the sound was coming out the crack in the hill. And she walked over, and sure enough, there, deep in the crack, if she looked peering in, she could see the other folk, the fair ones, the ones we don't name. And they were dancing and they were reeling and jigging, and some of them were playing fiddles and some were banging the barans and some were just dancing and flinging themselves around. And she was fascinated and she peered in, and a wee man with a red beard, he saw her and he was going, come on, come on, come on. Well, she knew that wasn't so much of a good idea. So she stayed put. And then, funnily enough, just like in Donald's story, there was a beautiful woman in a green dress with long hair, and she came over and she held her hand out. She said, Honora Cronin, you're welcome. Now, Honora didn't feel she could say no at this point, but she was a canny lass and she knew that if you ate the fairy food or you drank the fairy wine, you were never going to get out. So she went in and she sat and she watched as the fairies whirled and twirled and danced and sang. And they offered her a glass of wine and she said, oh no, I'm far too young. And then they offered her cake and she said, oh, I'd love to, but you know, I had so much dinner tonight, I can't eat a mouthful. And she also knew that the fairy time is very different to our own. And as Donald pointed out in his story, 5 minutes in human time can be 7 years in fairy. So what she did, as the tunes were playing and they were tapping the beat, she patted her own leg. 1, 2, 3, 4, 60 beats were 1 minute, 360 beats were an hour. And after she patted 360, she stood up and she started to back off. But one of the little men, he saw her and he looked and he waved, and suddenly all the music stopped. And suddenly every eye in the room was on Honora. And the air was heavy. It was so heavy with menace. It was as if the air itself held its breath. And that beautiful woman came forward and she said, Honora Cronin, are you thinking of leaving us already? And she said, oh, Mum, and she curtsied because she knew that you had to be polite to the good folk. Excuse me, Mum, thank you so much for the privilege of sharing your night tonight, but I must go home to my family. So, you've not eaten our food or drunk our wine, Honora? No, ma'am. And thank you so much. I really appreciate your offer. And my family and I really appreciate all the help you've given around the farm. But I must leave. I do beg your pardon. And that woman, she looked with those piercing green eyes and she said, well, Honora Cronin, I'll give you this. You know how to treat the fair folk. You've got the manners about you. But we're not very keen on people that try and trick us. I tell you what, nobody should leave empty-handed. And so I will bestow on you a a gift, or a curse. And only fate and time will tell you which it is. But leave us now, leave us in peace and in goodwill, and see what comes of it. And so Honora, she backed slowly out of that cleft in the hill, and she went to turn to run. And to her surprise, although only an hour had passed, the moon was high in the sky. The sky was dark. The stars were shining. If it wasn't for the brightness of the moon, she'd probably have fallen over on her way home. She pelted down the hill. She got to the farmhouse. She flung the door open just as the clock on the mantel shelf struck 1. And there, either side of the table, were her mummy and her daddy, and they were not looking happy. "Where the hell have you been, girl?" said her daddy. "It's 1 o'clock in the morning. You've shamed us all." Well, Honora blurted out her story. Her mother sat open-mouthed, and her father said, "Well, my girl, I've known you all your life. I'd never put you down for a liar nor a slut. And you've obviously been out carousing with some young man in the heather. Now tell us who he is." She said, "But I can't, Daddy. I'm telling you the truth." "Get to your bed," said her father, "before my anger gets me doing something I regret." So off she went to bed. And for the next few weeks, nothing was said. In fact, nothing was said. Neither of her parents spoke to her at all. Her 4 young sisters, as soon as her parents' back returned, they were giggling behind their hand. "Oh, Honora's got in trouble." And her parents just cut her dead, waiting for her to admit what she'd been up to. In fact, it went on so long, Honora started thinking, did I imagine that? Or was I doing something else? I don't know. But as the weeks went by and nobody else in the village seemed to notice that Honora had been out far too late for a decent young woman, and maybe her reputation wasn't ruined, that it was okay. So they softened slightly. But nothing else had happened. And she doubted herself. You know, the summer was coming on. What was going on? And one night, late in the darkness, she woke up suddenly, and it was as if the wind was blowing around the house. But it wasn't just wind. It was as if it was a sigh. It was a keening. It was a sobbing. And she went in and she knocked. "Mummy, Daddy, can you hear that?" "Hear what, girl?" The sound, the crying." "Oh, there's probably a bit of wind up. Go back to sleep. It doesn't sound like that to me." "Ugh, get away with you, girl." And she went back to bed, but she couldn't sleep because all she could hear was the sobbing and crying and keening and wailing. But the next morning, nobody else seemed to have heard it. But then word came up from the village that Mrs. O'Flaherty, dear old Mrs. O'Flaherty, that had been fit as a flea until 2 days ago, had been taken poorly and she died in the night. Well, nobody really connected Honora's nighttime with what happened to Mrs. O'Flaherty. Well, that was until Mr. O'Toole, who'd been as fit as a flea, and there was nothing wrong with him, and he was only 56. And the night that Honora woke her parents up again saying, "Mother, Father, can you not hear that? Can you not hear the wailing and the crying?" And they couldn't. And the next day, he was dead. And they began to realise something different had happened. And Honora began to understand what the fairy had said. For what the fairy had gifted her or cursed her was the ability to hear the banshee, the woman of the fairy hill, who cries and moans before any death. And it wasn't long before there became a pattern that whenever somebody in the village was about to die, Honora was kept awake with the keening and the wailing of the woman. In fact, it got so well known around the village that the villagers started to value her, because in those days, if you called the doctor, it cost you a lot of money. And if anybody was taken poorly, whether it was child or old person, they would always ask Honora first, come and sit with grandfather, come and sit with baby John, come and sit with Mary. And in the morning, tell us, should we call the doctor or the priest? Because if it was the priest we were to call, we wouldn't have to pay the doctor. So the blessing of that was she saved the villagers a lot of money. The curse of it was that anyone who was that connected with the fairy folk was to be feared. And there was no farmer in that area that wanted to marry her. But was that a blessing or a curse? Because as Mary, Honora's sisters were married off to middle-aged farmers who wanted a good wife. Honora didn't have a husband. She kept the farm. She looked after her mother and father, and when her mother and father died, she kept the farm and lived an independent life. And some of the independent life was a blessing because she had her freedom. She wasn't borne down with children. She wasn't 24 hours a day looking after some farmer. But the curse of it was she was feared in that village. And the curse of it was that on lonely nights, she just had herself waiting to listen to the sound of the banshee. And so it went on until she was a very old lady. And a stranger came to that town and he heard about Honora and he heard her story. And he was there the night that Honora heard the banshee and said, you know, this one's for me. And he was there in the morning when he opened her bedroom door and found her cold. And he went to the priest and he explained what had happened. And the priest said, oh, it's a terrible shame. Oh, she was a strange heathen woman, that one. And he said, yeah, but Father, you know, I've heard her side of the story. And I know that she always was the one who said whether it needed a doctor or the priest. But you seem to go along with it. Oh, sure, yes. But you know, she was a heathen woman. She was not as God-fearing as she should be. So do you not believe in all that? Well, of course I'm not. I'm a man of God, am I not? I believe in Jesus Christ and the Holy Mother and all the best saints. So, Father, why is it that when Honora said to send for the priest, she always came, he said, well, because she was a terrible heathen woman, but she was always bloody right.
Oh, Raheem, it's like a good red wine, the older you get, the better you want. Absolutely. So we're going to go to Baden. Baden, where are you, my friend?
Right, so I'm right here. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
Yeah, I know.
I love you, Baden.
You know, I feel the same
Can
way
we,
about
can we
you.
just
Not
note?
that last bit. So today, I'm going to tell you about my day, and then it'll become clear at the end why I'm telling you about my day instead of telling you a story, although telling you about my day is a story in itself, and I do have a story. I'm currently working on an application for some funding to put together a storytelling show that I really want to do. And over the last couple of days before today, I'd kind of ground to a halt. I was just, just couldn't get it together. I'm planning to work on it with Maria Credali, who I know some of you, I hope most of you know. And we had a chat this morning, and it really is good, they say, it's good to talk. Because through talking to her, I worked out what the problem was and where I'd been going wrong. So I really know exactly what I want to do with this thing. And because I know what I want to do and it's kind of writing itself in my head, I'm going to these people and saying, give me some money. And the form that they give you, which is like 45 pages long, essentially says, why should we give you anything? And I'm doing this thing and basically trying to say to them, look, I know what I want to do. I've talked to people about it. People have talked to me about it. And it's going to be good. It's going to be great. Just give me some money. And of course, they're saying, what is it you want to do? Why? How do you plan to do it? Who's it for? What do you expect to come out of it? And they're asking me all these questions. And I'm saying, never mind all that. It's going to be, I'm telling you, it's going to be all right. It's going to be great. Just give me some money. And then I'm trying to tell them what it is that I want to do and why it's going to be so great. But talking to Maria this morning, I worked out that actually I really need to think about what it is that I want to do, why I want to do it, who it's for, how I plan to do it, how I'm going to evaluate whether it's worth it. And at the end of the day, what it's all about. So I've been focusing on the outcome and thinking, I know what the outcome is going to be. Anybody who knows me, well, most of the people who know me, apart from a few of those who are here tonight, no names mentioned on an answer, are going to be telling me it's going to be rubbish. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Mike. And others who, Keith, have got faith in me and so on. And, but it really helped to recalibrate my brain. And it helped me to understand that you can't take this for granted. Not everybody's going to appreciate that you're potentially brilliant, or you might be as good as everybody thinks you are, or as you think you are, or whatever. Don't believe your own hype. That's the number one. And I've gone away and it's really made me have a rethink. And it also helped me to realize why I struggle so much doing this sort of thing. And now here comes the story. And I really love doing what I do. I love, as we all do, doing what we do. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it, because what we do is crazy. We stand up in front of people and we talk endlessly about stuff that's meaningless or meaningful to us, and we hope it's meaningful to them. But that's what we do. We do it because we love it. But I make a point of avoiding sitting down and analyzing what I do. And when people say, but so how and why? I'm like, don't want to know. And here's the reason why. Now, here's the story. And I'm serious. This is something that I really deeply take to heart. There was a centipede. It was walking along one very hot, very dusty day. And it was getting tired. It was getting exhausted. And if you've heard this story before, forgive me. And it stopped at the side of the road to take shelter, get some relief from the shade. If it was an Antiguan centipede, it would have been walking along going, boy, sun hot. That's what we say in Antigua. I mean, unnecessarily, because it is hot, but we don't talk about the weather other than to say, sun hot. So it took shade under relief of an overhanging bush. And while it was this sitting down breezing off, and we call it breezing off, like, whew, wow, getting a bit of relief from the heat and the blazing heat of the sun in the shade. And in that idle frame of mind that you get into, it looked down. It looked down at its 100 legs, arranged in neat rows on either side of its body. And it asked itself, gosh, how on earth do I manage to walk? How do I manage to put each one of these feet in front of the other in order? I mean, that is some complicated machinery, isn't it? That's some serious... And it sat there trying to figure out how it managed to move itself forward. And that centipede got so lost in the contemplation of its own locomotion, thinking so hard about doing what it had done naturally ever since it had learned to walk, that it became totally confused, totally bemused, completely lost. And it never moved from that spot. And it died right there. That's why I don't think too much about what it is that I do. I just try and do it and enjoy doing it. Thank you.
Baden, that's lovely, but I would like to say in my own defense, that the conversation we were having went in a different direction. All of it. It took a turn I wasn't expecting. Every time I've been in your company with your storytelling, you've never disappointed this little Englishman. That is for certain. And if you want some help with the bid or writing the bid and everything else, get hold of me and we'll go through it together on Zoom or something like that. Absolutely. Any experience, any way I can help, I'd be happy to. I really will. But I fear that you don't need my help because I think that you'll be fine all by yourself. With all the bands we have and everything else, it's hard work doing that kind of bid writing. We've had some experience of it. Just don't give up. Just take another step forward. When everything is dark and everything is finished and you think that the world has come to an end, take another step forward and you'll get there to the end. Okay?
Thanks, Mike. I
You'll
appreciate
be
it.
fine. And I am looking forward. I am looking forward to the work. Now, I know Rasheen is here and she'll be saying the same thing, but we would both be looking forward to the new work and finding a place to have it put in our respective places. And I don't want to speak for Rasheen, she can speak for herself, but I am sure, because I've known her a long time, exactly what her thinking is, because it's the same as mine. Now, we're sat here in Marrakesh, and I'm going to call it a day today, for all sorts of different reasons, mainly because I'm a dementic alcoholic, and I'm going to go down to the pub instead. Okay, so Evita is here, and Evita and I are going to walk down to the Medina, down to have a beer and everything else. So thank you for being here. I keep saying this every time I do this, and I'm absolutely certain that I'll be here in 2 weeks' time when I'm back here in Shropshire. I can't do this unless you come along and tell the stories and enjoy it. And I'm going to finish up with this, and I want you all to say a thing, because I've been in the company of Waleed this evening, who flies
Waleed, the magic man.
Waleed!
Okay, Waleed. So thank you very much, and we'll call it quits. And I'll see you
What
all.
a great night. Thanks
Don't see
everyone.
you.
Brilliant night of
Night all.
stories.
Baden, you don't have to
Happy
justify
evening.
what you do. When people ask me why I do what I do, I ask them, why is water wet?
Well,
Because it's
Night,
its nature.
everyone.
Great stuff.
Because it's its nature. So keep on and keep me in the loop, brother.
We'll
Will do.
keep going. We
Thanks
can't
all. Night
stop
all.
doing what we're doing. We've got more work to do yet. Okay, so good night to you all.
Good night,
May the
everyone.
gods go with
Good
you.
afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, Baba C. Good night, everyone.
Yeah. I don't know what time it is in Nova Scotia either. So. Right.
Hey, Mike, have
Bye
a drink.
all. Eleanor,
have a
good to
drink
see
in my
you.
honor.
Good to see you, everybody. Good to see you.
Absolutely, I'll
Rasheen,
send you a picture.
Wallace.
Waleed.
Night all.